Welcome, everyone. This is the Jenkins Governance Board meeting. It's the 10th of March, 2025. Thanks for being here. Today, we'll talk about upcoming calendar, news, action items, community activity, and governance topics. And those are actually relatively light. Any topics that I've missed or topics that need to be brought to the group that I need to insert into the agenda?
Discuss the bomb if it's not in the agenda yet.
Uh, Bomb. Okay, so and what would tell me more about the topic?
Because we seem to have some problems with infra these days, but maybe it's not just the infra, it's just that we have so many PRs, so many plugins building at the same time that maybe we should rethink what is the real goal of the bomb. I don't know if that's
Yeah, let's.
a release
I'd defer that
discussion, but
away from the governance board to other topics.
yeah, okay,
If that's
thank you.
okay with you. I
Yeah, of
agree it's
course.
worthwhile topic. I'm just not sure that this is the group to discuss it.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
In my
Any other items that should be added or proposed?
in my case, I would be interested to discuss the future of Gradle-based plugins and the toolchain. But I'm also not 100% sure it's the right venue for that. But I thought it would be a reasonable entry point.
Okay, good question. Yeah, so that's one I'm not
Yeah, so
sure.
it's
Again, I'm not
basically
sure that it's a fit for the governance meeting. Do we want to do it as a developer list? Let me ask that we've got key players here. So Basil, you and I know
Mhm.
have had some discussions about it. I- Shall we do it here? Do we want to do it as a thread in the mailing list with the developer list?
I suggest
Uh,
putting it to the bottom of the list, and if we get there, we get there.
yeah, I'm okay either way.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah. Sorry for interruption.
Future of Gradle toolchain for plugin development. All right, good. Anything else that needs to go onto the agenda? Okay, then let's
I
go
have
ahead.
just one suggestion.
Yes,
Yes,
Simon,
sorry.
go ahead.
I'm not sure that it is on the topic, but recently I've written a PR for a plugin, but and I wanted to push precisely the OpenStack cloud plugin. I've learned from somebody on the channel that Oliver Ganza, the maintainer, is retiring. So I've proposed to adopt the plugin. This is why I've asked and you kindly accepted. This is yes, and I wanted what should I do next to be accepted.
Yeah, so and I think that's so I'm going to put it at the end of our list. I think that's a good topic, but not particularly for governance. So next steps for a plugin for a plugin adoption.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, thanks for asking. Good. Anything else that needs to be added to the agenda? Okay. All right. So upcoming calendar, we've got an upcoming weekly release tomorrow. Next LTS is .3, and Bruno, you've agreed to be the release lead. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
Okay.
That's
And
what I was thinking.
Chris Stern has agreed to mentor, so you've got the right mentor for it. So that's great. Thank you.
You're
Also,
welcome.
upcoming LTS baseline selection is next week. So we'll choose the next baseline for Jenkins LTS. Uh, be especially mindful. We tend to choose the most recent weekly, so this is a good time to watch Jenkins weekly pull requests to be sure that they're the thing we want to include in the next LTS. Upcoming events, Linux Foundation Member Summit. Basil's going to attend that in here later in March in Napa, California. And then I'll be attending, and we think Basil will also be able to attend Open Source Summit North America in Denver in June. On the news, we've got a reminder, we had this last month as well. The DevOps Dozen Award was awarded to Jenkins. That was the only item of news that I had to offer. Any other news items that I should have put in here that I missed? Okay, the next was action items. We've got a sponsors / attribution entries for the downloads page. Basil, anything you want to report there?
No, nothing new this time.
Okay. And I'm behind schedule on my Contributor Summit blog post, but I will reuse portions of it for the CDF blog post, or CDF quarterly report, which I'm also behind on. So I've got two things there. On the I'm not behind, I'm pleased to say that the reimbursements look really, really good. We've got 8 of the 9 reimbursements already approved and through the software in the public interest, and we spent less than our budget. We've got one more remaining from Jan Faracik, and I sent him a reminder recently. And I still have the open action item to do further definition, discussion of sponsorship tiers and details of those tiers with the board. Sorry, that's not been on my list yet. Any questions on the action items? Okay, next topic then was Southern California Linux Expo. Basil, maybe you want to give a summary of this?
Yeah, we talked to a lot of people at the booth this year, and we had, as usual, people giving us both positive and negative impressions about their use of Jenkins. But I'd say overall, most people who came up to talk to us had either positive feelings about Jenkins in the present or positive memories of it in the past. It does, of course, remain an open question about how we can convert those positive memories into people using Jenkins again, rather than keeping it in the past.
Right.
But yeah, I'd say that we had some great conversations with people at the booth. I spoke to a few people that were interested in contributing to things like the user interface, and I referred them to the UX SIG meeting, so maybe some of them will join that in the next few weeks. But yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I was very impressed with a presentation from one of the administrators from the University of California, Santa Barbara, who talked about how they're doing Kubernetes on bare metal. They've gone from cloud-hosted data science that was becoming increasingly expensive to the tune of $30,000 a month to self-hosting inside their data center. And he talked about how they're orchestrating that all with Jenkins. Nice, very nice thing. And I met with several of our sponsors and was able to tell them how grateful we are for their sponsorship. So AWS, one of the members of the AWS team that sponsors open source, met with folks from Red Hat, met with other folks, and had people from Ampere, had a great chance to tell them thank you for their support. Any questions on scale on Southern California Linux Expo? Okay, Contributor Summit. The blog post summary is still needed. I'll get that done, I hope, very soon. And I'll use that as the summary to the CDF Technical Oversight Committee. Thanks very much for everyone that attended there. One of the outcomes of that was this Community Plugin Maintainers Initiative that is now in review and getting comments. Please, we welcome you to comment on it. The idea is let's reduce the friction for large-scale changes that need to sweep across multiple plugins. Any questions on any of those topics? Okay, so last topic was a status report on the content security project, content security policy project. We had proposed phase 2 to Michael Windsor of Alpha Omega, but we've not received an answer. It seems increasingly unlikely that they'll fund us for the next part. It was a good project. It worked well. We had over 40 plugins that were updated to be content security policy safe. We had additions to Jenkins core that are now released that improve its compliance with content security policy. So it made a good progress, but They get to choose how they fund. Governance topics then. So we've got an JFrog artifact storage reduction project that what happened was JFrog has asked us, hey, please keep your use of storage below 5 terabytes. And we were at almost 12. Well, Darren Pope has started a project with the approval of Vadek Follonier, the security officer, and Damien Duportal, the infrastructure officer, and has now reduced our storage to less than 4 terabytes. He did that by cleaning up incrementals and by dramatically reducing what we cache from one of the Atlassian public repositories. There will be some additional changes coming, but it's looking very positive. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, one question is there anything we need to actively do or add in sense of infrastructure to stop that from happening again, going over whatever limit?
Yes, there is. And so what's the infrastructure team is now adding it to their monitoring as a systematic process so that they
Cool.
will watch, just like we watch cloud expenses now, we will watch bandwidth use and storage use for JFrog Artifactory to be sure we don't exceed that. Yeah, good question, Alex.
Cool, that's great, because I know JFrog is supporting us quite a bit with that. So
They are, and they are a long-time Jenkins supporter and a long-time supporter of open source. We're very grateful for their support. Any other questions on the artifact storage reduction project? Okay, next story is on cloud expenses, and here it's all in budget, and that's a really nice thing. So we've got our Azure budget. We're staying well under the 5K a month that CDF has budgeted for us. And Microsoft just donated another 40K to us. So we've got funds available thanks to Microsoft. Our February spend was a little higher than typical. We're expecting our March spend will be dramatically less because we switched to AWS to run ci.jenkins.io. And you'll see that in the spend here. We went from January's 1.4K to February 8.5K, and likely March will probably exceed 10K on AWS. But their donation will last us at least through July. And given that I was able to connect with them at scale, I think we may persuade them to extend the donation further after that. Any questions, concerns, or comments on cloud expenses and plans? Okay, all right. So I think we've got enough time that we could take on the topics that I'd say were not board topics. Bruno, you had raised the question of plug-in bomb.
Yeah.
I think we could take Gradle toolchain first if we want,
Of course.
and let's talk there, and then let's look at the others. So Basil, maybe you could give us a current state of the Gradle toolchain as far as you see it, and let's talk further there.
Sure, I have used it somewhat recently to propose a pull request to the Gradle plugin to modernize it for Jakarta E9. And at the time I started working on that, the Gradle JPI plugin wasn't usable at all with the latest LTS release. But I filed a couple of issues in the JPI plugin, and I also made a sample conversion of Text Finder to use as an example of a very simple plugin. And between Rahul and Steve Hill, they fixed some of the most significant bugs and got it to work again for Text Finder. And with those bugs fixed, I was able to move forward with my modernization of the Gradle plugin for Jenkins using the latest release of the Gradle JPI plugin. While I was looking at the code and filing these issues, I saw that there were a lot of other things that were out of sync, but maybe not necessarily blockers. So things that I've noticed were, yeah, like not using the BOM in the same way that we do in the Maven plugin and things like that. So overall, my impression was that it was not working at all on the latest LTS, but now it's barely working. It would be probably some more effort to bring it into full parity with the Maven HPI plugin, because there are still a few significant differences between the two. Yeah, regarding the future in Jenkins, I would have no problem supporting it if it had full feature parity, but the challenge comes when there are significant differences and it becomes hard to support both styles when the resulting binaries are a lot different. So really the main thing we're looking for is for it to reach parity with the Maven ecosystem in order to have full support for it.
Yeah, thanks for the summary. We're definitely on the same page. Also glanced through GPI tools in the past months. So for everyone, one of the contexts is Google Summer of Code, because there was potential interest of having a GSOC project that would actually work towards feature parity with Maven. And yes, currently how Gradle GPI plugin works, firstly, it's not enough. It's not how anyone would like to see it. So it requires some work. But at the same time, it doesn't look impossible. It just requires somebody to invest considerable effort to make it. And for me, one of the questions is whether it actually makes sense, let's say in longer term. Because yeah, I know that I'm wearing also a Gradle hat here, but the question is, one plugin. Well, we still have around 40 Gradle plugins. Half of them are deprecated. Some of them are actively used. And the elephant in the room is of course Gradle plugin itself, because it's still a recommended plugin. While we do not really have integration testing running against it. So basically, for me, the question is, if it was just about Gradle plugin, etc., does it even make sense to invest time in that, or whether it makes sense to convert the Gradle plugin to Maven, which is probably a bit of a radical solution, but I'm open to it. But yeah, for me, firstly, the biggest priority as Gradle representative is to ensure that Gradle plugin remains functional, well tested, and integrated into the ecosystem. And how it's built, for me, it's rather a secondary topic. So this is why I wanted to bring it up, to just get perceptions from everyone.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so whether having a Gradle toolchain for Jenkins actually brings some value to the ecosystem.
I actually wrote an email about this in March 2023 to the developer list.
Yeah.
And my thoughts are still mostly the same. At the time, there were about a dozen plugins with more than 1,000 installations using Gradle for the build. And that's about 12 plugins out of, maybe 250 that we very actively maintain. And by far the biggest one was the Gradle plugin with 232,000 installs. After that, the next closest was multiple SCMs with 22,000 installs, and it just went down from there all the way into the long tail of things like Synopsys Coverity with 1,000 installs. So overall, the Gradle build process is not used very widely, and from a maintenance perspective, we're not doing anything on the core team to maintain it. So it's just purely on a volunteer basis. For example, the folks like Rahul and Steve who are maintaining it for their own internal needs elsewhere. So, I don't have any desire to actively kill it off, but we're also not spending a lot of time and effort maintaining the Gradle ecosystem as a core team. So
Yeah.
if you want the most streamlined and supported experience, then it's definitely recommended to use Maven. But at the same time, we're not stopping anyone from using Gradle. It just might be a little bit more work. So, like as far as the Gradle plugin is concerned, I wouldn't want to dictate any particular choice to them. But the Gradle developers would have a much easier time updating their plugin with current LTS releases if it did use Maven, because that's the most supported experience.
Maybe one thing is about not blocking people from using Gradle. My understanding that Jenkins doesn't longer host new plugins developed with Gradle. So let's say if you submit a plugin hosting request for a plugin based on Gradle, it wouldn't be accepted, or at least have a hard time to be accepted. Is that right?
Right. Yes.
Because for me, it's de facto blocking. And for the record, with the current status of GPI plugin, I have nothing against that. For me, the question is basically whether there are any considerable requests coming in with regards to Gradle-based plugins. So to put it differently, whether having a proper Gradle toolchain will help Jenkins to attract more plugins and more contributions.
Yeah, I haven't seen any, but I'm also not very involved with the hosting process recently, so I'm not a good person to ask.
So
Basically, basically what we're trying to do is make sure that people have a good experience with building their plugin. And right now with the JPI plugin, there's a lot of ways to, like for example, until very recently, it didn't support test extensions and things like that, which are part of our recommended steps for people writing new plugins, like to add a test for round tripping in the UI. So there's all sorts of small things where we didn't want users who were contributing a new plugin to have to run into an issue only to discover that it wasn't a test harness issue, but rather just a JPI plugin issue. So if the JPI plugin is improved a little more to be more fully in parity with the Maven one, then I wouldn't have any problem with new plugins being hosted with Gradle. And I think I also expressed that back in 2023 on the mailing list as well. That was really my main concern at the time.
We also need to look at the hosting checker. There's code there that does some checks with Maven and so forth that we would have to look at adding for any sort of Gradle-based plugins, because we have some automatic checks that we do prior to, when someone submits a PR for a hosting request for a plugin, we can do some automatic checks, make sure that right now that their POM is set up in certain correct ways. So we'd have to have some similar functionality so that we aren't increasing the workload on any of the hosting folks that review those requests.
Yeah, I agree.
So for me, and thanks for feedback, Basil, and everyone. So for me, one thing that basically I conclude that if there is interest from someone to work towards, let's say, updating a Gradle JPI plugin, maybe creating a convention plugin, because one thing I still see in the Gradle plugins for Jenkins is basically there is a lot of copy paste between these plugins, because in Gradle there is another entity, convention plugin, which is approximately similar to Power POM. So basically automating particular steps, etc. And basically what I would expect that we have a convention plugin that, for example, includes and enforces BOM, does the static checkers, does some notion of testing against versions like plugin POM. So for me,
Sure.
If these two parts happen, so somewhat updating GPI plugin, having convention plugin, having adoption, that it would still make sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, then basically for me, I probably will still keep this project idea up because we got quite a few follow-ups already in the Kotlin Foundation. So yeah, last week we had a discussion whether it should be promoted at the Jenkins meetup, etc. We put it in the Kotlin Foundation. One reason is because Gradle participates as a part of Kotlin Foundation, although Gradle formally doesn't belong to it. But yeah, one of the items would be also doing the new toolchain and new plugins. We use Kotlin DSL. So, but yeah, it's implementation detail on our side.
Great. Thank you.
So I think that I will keep it as is. If it brings some outcome, of course, it's great. But I think that I will keep the project idea under the disclaimer that it's still a kind of discovery project, because I don't believe that a GSOC project can get it to the final state where we want it to be. But if somebody wants to work on it, why not?
Yeah, this is a bit of a tough project because it involves learning a lot of very deep details about how Jenkins does plugin loading and class loading and builds and things like that. It's stuff that isn't documented very well. So I would imagine that a beginner would take a long time to get up to speed learning all of these details.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's I think I could see that there's an awful lot of knowledge encoded into the Maven toolchain, and extracting that knowledge out and then inserting it into a Gradle toolchain will have all sorts of learning. Yeah. All sorts of challenges to a new contributor. Yep.
Some bits can be potentially generalized. I mean, some things like packaging HPI, etc. Potentially, it could be even detached in a library, because I see no reason to maintain 2 versions of this code in different plugins. But again,
Yeah.
it's not for the first phase of a GSOC project if it happens. First
Right.
phase would be just creating a convention plugin, I think, because it's a good first learning step.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else on Gradle toolchain? Okay, then let's take the next one. Simon, your question on next steps for plugin adoption. So maybe can you ask your question and let's try to address it.
Yes, thank you. I'm working for an open source company, and we have a need for customer to integrate some commits from its part. So I started with one commit. I think further commits will come, and this is why I'm interested to participate in the OpenStack Cloud plugin. And if I can adopt it, it will be much more interesting. So I've read the mail sent by Oliver Gonza, the maintainer, saying that he was looking for maintainers, for people adopting the plugin. He has listed other plugins, but OpenStack Cloud plugin interests me, and this is why I have applied and pushed the PR to have the permission to write to the repository. So you can be accepted. Not the PR, but you asked for Oliver to accept the PR.
And it turns out that's wrong. We don't need to do that because he already said it was up for adoption. So I made a mistake
adoption,
there.
yes. So it was Thursday or previous Thursday or Friday. So this is why I wanted to know what could I do in order to be able to go further in the process of adopting it.
From my point of view, I looked at the hosting request and everything looks correct on your side. So I think it's just a matter of pinging the hosting team to continue processing the request. I don't think you've missed anything, if that's what you're asking. It looks like a valid request from my side.
Okay, so the thing I have to do is to wait, from what I understand.
Yeah, so there are 4 members of the hosting team. Tim, Marcus, Alexander, and Adrian. And from my side, the next step would be to follow up with the hosting team about why they haven't processed the request yet. My guess is simply that they are very busy and low on time. They're all volunteers working on hosting right now, so we do sometimes have some gaps in response. For example, I've often had to ping them a few times to get some of my requests processed, but that's simply because it's a volunteer type of thing. So there's no issue on your side if that's what you were worried about. I would recommend just pinging them a second time and asking them, hey, can we continue processing this?
Right.
Yes, thanks for your explanation. I didn't note the 4 or 5 people, but I think they've seen my pull request, so I
Mark,
will
for your notes, the 4th one was Marcus Winter.
Oh, thank you. Good. Okay, got it.
Yeah, you could ping the team itself using @JenkinsInfra/hosting, or you could ping an individual person in the team already. Like, for example, Marcus and Adrian have already replied to that thread, so you could ping them individually since they're already active in the thread.
Okay, so they are present in the Jenkins CI Jenkins/Jenkins room. So if this is the case, I think I suppose that they have read my
maybe, but you should
my question.
ping them directly, I think, in your pull request on the RPU. That would be easier, and you can just tag the team directly within GitHub. At least that's my understanding.
I actually just read the latest message, and I think Adrian was saying that he wants someone to invite you into the organization.
Oh, that's
so it's a matter of
Tim Jacome task.
Exactly. So or an Alex Brandes task, because of those 4 members of the hosting team, all 4 of them can process existing members, but only 2 of them can invite new members. So I think we need either Tim or Alex to invite you to the organization to start with, and then one of the other 2 members could then process the PR. So it's simply a matter of internal hosting processing rather than anything else outside.
Well, no, but it does mean that, Simon, you will receive an email message that says you've been invited to join the Jenkins CI GitHub organization, and you'll need to complete that process.
Okay.
Once you receive that email, there'll be a button you click. You need to click that button and allow yourself into the Jenkins CI GitHub org.
Okay. If I didn't, yes. So
yeah, go ahead, Simon.
If I didn't, I suppose that I have not missed the mail.
I think you have not. No, it hasn't been sent yet. You will receive it. It will eventually arrive.
Okay.
Simon, I just wanted to say, yeah, if ever you feel lost or stuck or whatever, I think you may be a French speaker, a French native speaker, and so am I. So don't hesitate to get in touch with me in French, and let's see together if we can make this progress.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Oh, and here I was thinking you were not a French speaker. Sorry, Simon. All right.
My
mistake.
I'm living near Paris.
Great. Welcome to Jenkins. Thanks very much. Anything else on plugin adoption? Okay, so last topic then for Bruno. Bruno, plugin bomb.
Yeah, maybe you were right. Maybe that's not the right type of meeting to discuss that. Maybe it would be better tomorrow with Damien in the infra team meeting. But my concern was just that it's difficult these days to build the bomb, to create a release for the bomb. Lots of different factors happen to make us struggle with the build. And I was just wondering, what is the main goal of having the bomb build tightly linked with the PCT? I mean, there are so many tests. Is it really important to have that many tests when we try to release a new bomb? It's a very naive question. I have no idea. And I think, Basil, you must be fuming. But I just wanted to know, should we keep that this way because it's taking hours and it's difficult? Or could we simplify it and still have a valid release one of these days?
Did you want me to take this, Mark?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
thanks.
so we previously ran the entire test suite on every bomb pull request, and we decided to simplify that and only run them once a week during releases as a cost saving measure. The concern I would have with running them less frequently than that is if they're run less frequently than once a week, I would imagine that tests would start failing and nobody would pay any attention to it if they were run so infrequently. In other words, if they're run, let's say once a month, that's so infrequent that I don't think we'd even notice if things started failing. So it would be almost pointless to even run them if it was that infrequent. We do need to run them at some frequency. And once a week has been the current sweet spot in terms of not running them too often so that we're spending a lot of money, but also running them often enough that we do actually pay attention and fix failures. Now, if what's been going on in the past few weeks is simply that we did an infrastructure migration that hasn't been stabilized yet. So that's really a separate concern
Right.
to me from how often do we run the tests, because no matter how often we run them, whether it's once a day, once a week, or once a month, they should pass every time we run them. And if they don't pass, that's either an infrastructure problem or a development incompatibility. If it's a development incompatibility, we want to correct that to prevent end users from seeing a bug. And if it's an infrastructure problem, then we want to correct that so that we can be productive as developers. So, and I do believe in this case it is an infrastructure problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So did that address your question, Bruno?
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
I mean, we very much do have an infra problem, and you've been very patient going through 12 runs of the build. I think we may be approaching 20 now runs of the bomb build, trying to get a release. So it's not been cheap either, right? These things runs thousands of concurrent machines to get this job done. So or 1,000 plus. It's an impressive thing. I like what it does. I really want to keep doing it, but we got to keep working with the infra team to find what will it take to get it back to as reliable as it was before this infrastructure migration.
Yeah, and I'm not against the temporary solution either, but what I always say when someone asks me about a temporary solution is, have we identified what the permanent solution would look like? So for example, we could say, because right now the only tests that fail are the timing related tests, we have got about 24 of those, right? So, you could just say, well, turn off those 24 tests. Okay, fine. But what does the long-term solution look like? How do we get them back on? That's the question that we haven't really
Right.
answered fully yet. So are we dealing with, change in memory allocation between AWS and Azure? Are we dealing with lower CPU credits? That's sort of the question that we need to answer with the infrastructure team from my perspective. And once we figure that out, then we could decide, okay, are we going to do a short-term solution and disable these tests? Or do we just need to change something about the resource allocation on the cloud side?
Right. Yep. All right. Any other topics that need to come to the board? All right. Thanks very much. Thanks a bunch for being here.